A black Uber driver pulled up to First National Bank in his old Honda. The bank CEO, standing outside, took one look at him and laughed. "Hey, driver, you're blocking the entrance. People like you need to park in the back." What that CEO didn't know? The man he just insulted was James Mitchell, a self-made tech billionaire worth $3.2 billion. And he wasn't there for a ride. He was there to check out a bank he was thinking about buying. In the next 20 minutes, that CEO went from laughing to begging, because James didn't just buy the bank. He bought it specifically to fire that CEO and teach him a lesson about respect. This is a true story about karma, and it's about to blow your mind. Before we get into this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more stories where people get exactly what they deserve. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now let's dive in. Who is James Mitchell? James Mitchell grew up in South Chicago. His family was poor. His father worked 2 jobs as a janitor. His mother cleaned houses. James remembers wearing the same pair of shoes for 3 years because they couldn't afford new ones. But James was brilliant. He got a scholarship to MIT, studied computer science, and at age 25, he started a software company in his tiny apartment. 20 years later, that company was worth billions. James had become one of the richest black entrepreneurs in America. Despite his wealth, James never forgot his roots. He still drove regular cars. He still wore simple clothes. And he still believed that how people treat you when they think you're nobody shows their true character. The CEO, Richard Pemberton. Richard Pemberton was 55 years old. He'd been CEO of First National Bank for 8 years. The bank had 47 branches and assets worth $2 billion. Richard came from old money. His grandfather founded the bank. He grew up wealthy, went to private schools, and never struggled for anything. Richard had a problem, though. He looked down on people he thought were beneath him: delivery drivers, service workers, anyone who didn't wear an expensive suit. His own employees complained about his attitude, but the board of directors ignored it because the bank was profitable. Why this day mattered. James had been looking to diversify his investments. His financial advisors told him First National Bank was undervalued and available for acquisition. The current board was considering selling because they needed capital. James decided to visit the bank anonymously. He wanted to see how they treated regular customers. He wanted to see their culture from the inside. So he dressed in simple clothes, drove his old Honda that he kept for sentimental reasons, and pretended to be an Uber driver waiting for a passenger. He had no idea he was about to meet the most arrogant CEO he'd ever encountered. James pulled up to the bank's main entrance at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. He parked at the curb and checked his phone. He was reading emails about the potential acquisition. Richard Pemberton walked out of the bank's front door. He was wearing a $5,000 suit and expensive Italian shoes. He saw James's old Honda, and his face twisted with disgust. Richard walked up to the car and knocked hard on the window. James rolled it down. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, you can help me by moving this junk car," Richard said loudly. "You're blocking the entrance to my bank." "Uber drivers are supposed to park in the back lot, not here where important people need to walk." James stayed calm. "I'm not blocking anything. There's plenty of room to walk past." "Listen, buddy," Richard said, his voice getting nastier. "I don't have time to argue with you. You people think you can park wherever you want. This is a respectable business. Move your car to the back, or I'll have security tow it." Several bank employees walking by heard everything. A few looked uncomfortable. One young woman whispered to her colleague, "That's so rude." James looked at Richard carefully. "You people? What do you mean by that?" Richard smirked. "You know what I mean. Now move. I have a board meeting." James decided to test Richard further. He opened his car door and stepped out. He was wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt. "Actually," James said, "I'm here to visit the bank. I'm thinking about opening an account." Richard actually laughed out loud. "You? Open an account here? Do you know what our minimum deposit is?" "No," James said. "Tell me." $50,000 for a premier account," Richard said proudly. "This isn't some local credit union. We serve serious clients, businessmen, investors. Not," he looked James up and down, "Uber drivers." A small crowd of people had gathered now. Some were bank customers. Others were employees on break. Everyone was watching. James pulled out his phone. What if I can meet that minimum? Richard rolled his eyes. Sure you can. Look, I don't have time for games. Either move your car or I'm calling the police for loitering. One of the bank employees, a middle-aged black woman named Patricia, stepped forward. Mr. Pemberton, maybe we should... Patricia, go back inside, Richard snapped. This doesn't concern you. Patricia looked at James with apologetic eyes and walked back into the bank. James made a mental note. Patricia had tried to help. She was kind. She deserved better than working for someone like Richard. A police officer happened to be walking by. Richard immediately flagged him down. Officer, this man is loitering and refusing to move his vehicle, Richard said. The officer, a young Latino man, looked at James's car. Sir, you can't park here for extended periods. Are you waiting for someone? I was trying to enter the bank, James said calmly, but this gentleman has been telling me I'm not welcome. The officer looked confused. Why wouldn't he be welcome at a bank? Richard's face turned red. I didn't say that exactly. I said he needs to park in the back if he's going to stay. The curb isn't restricted parking, the officer said, looking at the signs. He's not breaking any laws. Well, as CEO of this bank, I'm asking him to leave our property, Richard declared. The sidewalk is public property, the officer replied. Sir, he turned to James, you're fine to park here for a reasonable time, but if you're not conducting business, you should probably move along eventually. Thank you, officer, James said. I appreciate your fairness. Richard was fuming. He leaned close to James and whispered, so the officer couldn't hear. People like you will never have enough money to bank here. Stop wasting everyone's time and go back to driving. That was the moment James made his decision. He was going to buy this bank, and Richard Pemberton was going to regret every word. James got back in his car and drove away. Richard smirked, thinking he'd won, but James didn't go far. He drove 2 blocks to his lawyer's office downtown. His attorney, Sarah Chen, had been handling the preliminary negotiations for the bank acquisition. Sarah, I want to accelerate the purchase, James said. How fast can we close? The board is motivated, Sarah replied. If you offer the right price, maybe 2 weeks. Why the rush? Because I just met the CEO, and he needs to go, immediately. James offered $2.4 billion, 20% above market value. The board of directors couldn't refuse. 3 banks had been bidding, but James's offer was the highest by far. 12 days later, the deal closed. James Mitchell became the new owner of First National Bank. Richard Pemberton had no idea. The board had kept the buyer's identity confidential during negotiations. All Richard knew was that the bank had been sold to a private investor. He assumed he'd keep his job. After all, he'd been CEO for 8 years. The bank was profitable under his leadership. On Monday morning, Richard arrived at his office at 8 a.m., same as always. At 9 a.m., his assistant told him there was a board meeting, emergency session, all executives required to attend. Richard walked into the boardroom. The board members were already seated, and at the head of the table sat James Mitchell, now wearing a sharp business suit. Richard stopped dead. His face went white. You? Hello, Richard, James said calmly. Surprised to see the Uber driver? The board members looked confused. James continued. 2 weeks ago, Richard and I met outside this bank. I was dressed casually, driving an old car. Richard decided, based on my appearance, that I wasn't worthy of banking here. He called me you people. He tried to have me arrested. He made it clear that people who look like me aren't welcome at his bank. Richard's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. What Richard didn't know, James continued, is that I'm James Mitchell. I founded Mitchell Tech Solutions. My company is worth $8 billion. I personally am worth $3.2 billion. And as of last Friday, I am the new owner of this bank. One board member gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God." James opened a folder. I've spent the last 2 weeks investigating this bank. I've talked to employees. I've reviewed complaints. Richard, did you know that 23 employees have filed HR complaints about your behavior in the last 3 years? Complaints about discrimination, complaints about verbal abuse, complaints about creating a hostile work environment? Richard finally found his voice. Those complaints were investigated. They were, they were ignored, James cut him off. Because you're the CEO and the board didn't want to rock the boat. But I'm not the old board, I'm the new owner. And I have different standards. James stood up. Richard Pemberton, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to clear your office. Richard's face turned from white to red. You can't do this. I have a contract. Your contract has a morality clause, Sarah Chen, James' attorney, said from the corner of the room. Creating a hostile work environment violates that clause. You'll get no severance. You're terminated for cause. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Richard looked around the room desperately. You're doing this because I didn't recognize you. Because of one mistake. James looked him in the eye. No, Richard. I'm doing this because you revealed who you really are. You didn't treat me badly because you didn't recognize me as a billionaire. You treated me badly because you thought I was someone who couldn't fight back. You've been treating people like that for years. Today it finally caught up with you. Richard was escorted out. The board meeting continued without him. James's first act as owner was to promote Patricia, the woman who'd tried to help him, to VP of Customer Relations. He gave her a 50% raise. His second act was to implement mandatory respect and diversity training for all management. His third act was to review every HR complaint that had been ignored and compensate the employees who had been mistreated. The story leaked to the press within days. Billionaire buys bank after CEO's racist remarks became a national headline. Richard Pemberton tried to find another banking job, but the story had gone viral. Every bank in America knew his name. No one would hire him. He tried to sue for wrongful termination. His lawsuit was dismissed. The judge said the morality clause was clear and the evidence of his behavior was overwhelming. 6 months later, Richard was working at his brother's insurance company in a mid-level position. His $5,000 suit stayed in the closet. His arrogance had cost him everything. James's story inspired people across the country. It became a reminder that you never know who you're talking to. That homeless person might be a millionaire testing society. That delivery driver might be your future boss. That person in simple clothes might be the most important person in the room. But the real lesson wasn't be nice because someone might be rich. The real lesson was be nice because everyone deserves respect. James gave an interview to Forbes magazine 3 months after buying the bank. I didn't buy First National Bank to get revenge on Richard Pemberton. I bought it because it's a good investment. But firing him? That was necessary. Not because he disrespected me, but because he disrespected everyone he thought was beneath him. A leader who treats people differently based on their appearance or job title is a leader who creates a toxic culture. My parents were janitors and housekeepers. They worked harder than Richard Pemberton ever did. They deserved respect then, and they deserve respect now. Every employee at this bank will be treated with dignity, regardless of their position. That's not just good morals. That's good business. The bank's employee satisfaction scores went up by 67% in the first year under James's ownership. Customer satisfaction improved. Profits increased. Turns out, respect is actually good for business. Patricia, the new VP, said in an internal memo, "For years we were afraid to speak up, afraid to defend customers who were treated poorly, afraid to report discrimination. Mr. Mitchell changed everything. He showed us that doing the right thing isn't just possible, it's required." The final message today: First National Bank is one of the most respected financial institutions in the region. James Mitchell still visits branches randomly, sometimes dressed casually, to see how employees treat everyone who walks through the door. Richard Pemberton's name became a cautionary tale in business schools. Harvard even created a case study titled "The Cost of Arrogance: How One CEO Lost Everything in 20 Minutes." The story reminds us, character is revealed not by how you treat people who can help you, but by how you treat people who can't. Richard treated James badly because he thought James was powerless. That one decision cost him his career, his reputation, and his future. Effective immediately, security will escort you out. Treat everyone with respect. Not because they might be secretly rich, but because it's the right thing to do. If this story inspired you or taught you something valuable, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. We bring you real stories about justice, karma, and people getting exactly what they deserve. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when someone learns respect the hard way. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever been judged by your appearance? How did you handle it? Thanks for watching, and remember, respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost everything. See you in the next story.